Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the kingdom versus the hustle and grind culture. What are the differences? Is the best way to build a business through the hustle and grind concept or philosophy that we see all over Instagram and Facebook and all the gurus telling us to be savages and to work, outwork everyone? Or is it the extreme opposite side of it, which is you see this often even within the kind of the new age movement, new thought movement, where you kind of attract it. So the idea is that all you got to do is just work on yourself, and the byproduct of that is that you're going to be quote unquote successful. And I think the reason why there's such a massive chasm between these two ideas and philosophies is that both have elements of truth, but both are missing the entirety of how the kingdom actually work. So what I want to do in this video is just explain to you guys exactly how I see the kingdom of God work on a personal level in my life, and also the many people that I've had the privilege of coaching or working with. And here's what I see. Often, let's say we read Matthew 6:33, and it says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." And what are all these things? Well, all these things obviously are the very things that we all are pursuing on a day-to-day basis. This is why most of us have jobs. Most of us start businesses. The reason being is that we want to make sure that our needs are met. And it's really the primary drivers for humans is what? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the base level, we want to make sure that our needs are met. There are basic needs, obviously, like air, oxygen, water, and all those things. But then there is security, a home. These are all elements that make us feel secure. And as we go higher and higher on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we end up at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. And you see this often with very wealthy guys that just hustle and grind, and they build these massive companies. But then there's this vacuum. And the vacuum essentially is that there's no purpose and meaning to their lives. And so what they do is they go on they start nonprofits, they want to change the world, or they end up buying these big, massive, boats, and they try to send rockets into Mars, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, what are they trying to do is they're trying to self-actualize. And what Jesus is teaching is the exact opposite. What he's saying is that the soul is more important than any of those. So the concept is it's not that God doesn't want your needs being met. He's just saying you prioritize the wrong things, because what he came to teach is this. He came to teach about a kingdom, and the kingdom of God is not of this world. So what he's given us is a spiritual paradigm and a perspective, and he's saying, no, 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 you don't work from down here to up here, you work from up here to up here. So what he's saying is that if we seek first the kingdom of God and we make that the primary objective, which is that's where we find our identity, that's where we find our purpose. And these are, by the way, the very things right now, especially in Western civilizations, that are the cause of so much of the substance abuse and the suicide. And you see it all over. People, there is what I would consider to be an epidemic of meaning. People have no meaning or purpose because they essentially have been trying to self-actualize, or they're trying to get meaning from themselves or from the things that they do. So these are all obviously meanings and purposes that are externally motivated. And Jesus is talking about a motivation that comes from the inside out. This is what he was saying to the Pharisees in Luke 17:20, when he's saying that the kingdom of God is not to be observed, but that the kingdom of God is in the midst of you or within you. And yet here they are, The kingdom is right in front of them, i.e., Jesus, in a sense that he is the one that's bringing the kingdom of God, the reality, because he is the one who is flesh and at the same time he is God. So he's standing in between these really interesting, he's fully human and fully flesh. And he is the embodiment of the kingdom. He embodies it, and he's saying to them, hey, the kingdom of God is in the midst of you. And when he dies, the kingdom of God actually no longer is something that is in the midst of us, meaning around us, but it was actually, we are literally, we become, it says, partakers of the divine nature. That's what Peter says. What that means is we get commingled because of Jesus' sacrifice, so that we then enter into his inheritance. And it's pretty wild, the idea and the concept. So what this means then for you on a day-to-day basis is that it's not that Jesus is saying that you shouldn't prepare, you shouldn't plan, you shouldn't work. He's saying you have to get your priorities right. Your identity precedes your purpose. So many people are chasing purpose without identity. But unless you know who you are or whose you are, it's going to be next to impossible to find purpose. And so this is what has happened in our world today and then when there is no purpose, any other purpose will do. And when there's a vacuum of purpose, then people just chase anything, and they'll find purpose in drugs, they'll find purpose in politics, they'll find purpose in their work, they'll find purpose in things that they've imagined and created. There's so many things that in our culture right now, literally, it's insanity. So for you as a Christian and a business person, what does that mean for you? Do you build your business on this concept and idea of the hustle and grind? Or do you simply just, quote unquote, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you? Well, here's what I believe. I believe that I think when we prioritize the right things, and so if we prioritize our relationship with God, that means then we get to co-create with God. And now, rather than chasing the hustle and grind concept, which is works mindset, what we then get to do is we actually get to live life by addition. That's what he's talking. God is talking about this idea and concept that God will take care of us. But we do have a role to play because we have free will. And so this is the part that I think so many people miss out, is that we all have delegated responsibilities. We're ambassadors. And our responsibility is that we actually need to bring heaven down. We are the ones who bring the reality of heaven into this world. And so work is part of it, but it's how we work that's important. And so most people, what they're doing is that they're putting self-effort. Luther, this great Christian reformer, said something that's profound. He said, the default of man is works. What does that mean? Is that every morning you and I are waking up and we're trying to be good enough. We're trying to work our way. That's religion, by the way, always through self-effort. But the key concept that I want you to understand is that if you're actually motivated by faith, then the work that you do, first of all, is going to have impact, but it's also going to have lasting impact. And in addition to that, it's no longer about you. It's not about you trying to serve your needs or to self-actualize, but that you actually know who you are. And so therefore now you can live what I call this beautiful integrated life, which is essentially every part of you working in concert to move you towards one direction. Because here's the point. What is the point for an individual, a man, to gain the entire world but lose his soul? That's the Matthew 6:33. The concept is that we bow the knee. We understand positionally that we're not God. And that's the disposition that then will give you the permission to go out and work. It's not about the amount of hours you work. I think we often think of it in that context, but I remember this one time. I love golfing. And as I was in my younger days, and I would go to this driving range, and I would stay there for hours upon hours. No one was forcing me to stay there. The reason why I was there, I was working on my golf swing, but I was enjoying it. So I was lost in the work. Yeah, there's the story of Jesus in, I think it's in John 4, and this is after the Samaritan at the well, and he has this incredible encounter with her, and then thousands of people are coming, and he's ministering to them, and it's late at night, and the disciples are basically saying, "Hey, the restaurants are going to be closing. We're hungry," so they're looking for Jesus, and they're like, "Jesus, we gotta go." And Jesus looks at his disciples and he says this. He says, "My food is to do the will of my Father." Jesus was ministering there the entire day. And I'm sure physically he would be tired. But there was something beautiful that was happening. And this is it, that he was living out his purpose. And when you live out your purpose, then you might wake up at 3 a.m. and work on stuff. You'll find the energy and the capacity to do it, because now you're doing it from a disposition, a place of enjoyment, rather from a place of chasing and pursuing. And I think this is the problem with the hustle and grind culture, is that it's teaching us that somehow we can outrun our identity. Here's the thing. You cannot out hustle, out grind your identity. How you see yourself and the way you perceive yourself, and the stories that you're telling yourself that came from your childhood traumas. Those stories you can't outrun. I'm telling you, I've tried it for many years, and what will happen is you'll always come back to the same place. This is the story of the Israelites that end up spending 40 years in the wilderness. The point of that story is really simple. It's the fact that you can take the individuals from out of Egypt or out of slavery, but unless they go through a belief shift or a mindset shift, all you're doing is you're going to bring slavery into the promised land. How many of you have made those changes, locations, different businesses, and so on? But the problem is that the common denominator, which is you, is still there. And if you don't have a transformation and your belief system changes, all you're going to do is you're going to bring that same belief system. And most of the time, by the way, there's no judgment here. It's childhood trauma. It's meanings that you've given to events, whether it's money, business. And what happens, they spill themselves over into your relationships, into businesses. And this is why people who get divorced, once, and then they get remarried, the likelihood of them getting divorced, it's like it grows exponentially. So most people, like, the divorce rate seems so high, but the reason why it's so high is because it's the individuals that are divorcing multiple times. And so what I'm saying is that you cannot outrun your identity. If you don't work on your identity, if you don't know who the heck you are, all you're going to do is make the same mistakes over and over again. It doesn't matter how much money you make, because you're always going to come back to your story. And so this is what happened to the Israelites for 4 years. All God was doing was essentially, this was a 12-day trip. That's all it would have taken, was 12 days. But because they spent so much time in slavery, 400 years, that's a long time. And so that mindset had to die. And so it took literally 40 years for that mindset. You can read it in Joshua 5, where eventually, the old mindset, meaning that old generation, had to die. And what God does is that he then cuts a completely new covenant. So he now has a brand new relationship with this group of people that are all born in the wilderness. They have no connection to Egypt. So do you get it? And that's it's symbolic of what God does for us, in the sense that he cuts us away from our old identity, and then he gives us a brand new identity. And now our relationship with God is not based on our works, based on our performance, our law keeping, any of those stuff. Our relationship is literally based on what Jesus has done for us. That's really what Jesus did on the cross. He did what we could not do for ourselves. He did it on our behalf, because we essentially we're just not good enough. And this is the problem with most people, is that the identity that they currently have is just not good enough to get you to where you want to go. And so we've got it upside down. We focus on work, 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 work. We focus on grind, 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 grind. But that is not the solution. And so we always tell people hard work will, outwork talent, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, these sounds great for Instagram posts, but in reality, we got to get under the hood and find out what's motivating us and what's driving us. And so your belief system is everything. Because when the belief system changes, and this is what happens to the Israelites, is that belief system, now they cut a new covenant, and they have to go through a season of healing, and they're in this place called Gilgal, where God actually, circumcises all these. I know it's kind of crazy story, but just before Jericho, just before the promised land, just before they're about to cross over, God says, no, I'm going to cut a brand new covenant with you. And so they spent a year essentially getting used to God, into this new relationship that they have with God, because God has cut a new covenant with them. And when they come into Jericho, I mean, the battle was already won. They literally all had to do was walk around and play instruments for 7 days. Why did God could have made them do whatever he wanted. What he was essentially saying to them is that the battle is always within. If you win the personal battle within yourself, then the byproduct of that is a lot of the challenges that you've been just, they look like mountains. I was talking to a client a few days ago, and he was explaining to me that, he's so gifted and so talented, but failure to launch, he cannot launch. And the reason being is that he's been looking for external validation. He's been looking for confirmation for other people. He's looking for people to give him permission, rather than working through the reasons why he's not launching, the fears, and addressing the belief system. And when we got to the root of that belief system and he understood why he wasn't launching, suddenly, guess what? He launched. That is the point. So the point is that it's not just about effort. Effort is important. It's part of living. But it's about how we put the order is important. And that's the thing that's missing right now. If you get the order right, then it's going to be, is it going to be overnight? No. Look at the Israelites. It took them a year before they actually walked into, because there's a journey, there's a season of healing. Because if you've been behaving a certain way, believing certain things, your body is literally addicted, your nervous system. So you have to go through a process of rewiring. Yeah, there's some people that have these, encounters with God. 1 minute, like Paul in Acts 9, he has an encounter with God and he falls off the horse, and before you know it, he's out there ministering. Like literally, like, I mean, I don't know the timeline, but from reading Acts 9, it's like he falls off the horse, he's blind, and then all of a sudden, Ananias, Ananias prays for him, and then he's able to see, and he's walking to. But here's the key here. He does also, then he's sent into a season of wilderness to be prepared. And this is where he has his encounters with Jesus, literally, because when he comes back, he starts to teach, and he says to these disciples who walked with Jesus, he says, unlike you guys, he says, I don't know Jesus in flesh the way you do. I know him in spirit. So he actually had the most profound revelation of God's grace. Peter didn't get it, who got, quote unquote, the key to the kingdom. God gave him the key because Peter had a revelation of who the Messiah was, and he gave him the key. But it was Paul that really truly had the final revelation, and that's the revelation of grace. And this is why the amount of writings, Paul's writings in the New Testament, and they're profound, and because he really truly got to know Christ in a different way. He knew him in the spirit. So he had that season of preparation before he was launched out. So what I like to encourage you guys is that if you're stuck and you're unable to move ahead, or you're just dealing with self-sabotage, or you're dealing with chronic depression, whatever it might be, most of the stuff is due to the fact that you really haven't truly fully worked through your identity. And so hopefully this helps you to understand and unlock, the how the kingdom order works. It's that God doesn't want us to hustle and grind. Yeah, that's the beauty of it all. Even the story of the parable of the vineyard, where Jesus talks about the vineyard owner, and the vineyard owner goes out and he hires the first group of people at like 7 a.m. in the morning, I think it is, and he he pays them a penance. I think that's like a penny or whatever it was for the day, is silver. So that was the wages for the day, but they actually end up having a transaction, meaning they sign a contract. So it's law based. And then 2 hours later, he hires another group of people for the same amount. And then at, I think, 12 o'clock, he sees a bunch of people that are just idle, doing nothing. And he's like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, well, we have nothing to do. And so he says, come work with me. Those individuals, they don't sign contracts. He doesn't even tell them the amount. So they come. And then there's another group at 2 o'clock or at 5 o'clock. And then there's another group that's hired with only like 1 hour left of the workday. So that last group only ends up working for 1 hour. And at the end of the day, he tells the manager, the vineyard owner, to go out there and pay these guys. And he says, but start with the last first. So the people that only work 1 hour are the ones, they got paid the same amount of time and they worked the least amount up. They only worked for an hour. And of course, the people that were up at 7 a.m. and worked all day, they were angry. It says actually they were jealous. They were envious. And the vineyard owner says, what is it to you? Why are you jealous? Are you jealous because I am generous? Grace is unfair. What is that teaching us? It's teaching us this, is that you can even live your life through law-based hustle and grind that's transactional, and you're going to toil throughout the day. But at the end of the day, the people who end up, when we work powered by the grace of God, it's that the first will always be last. He's explaining to us is that the hustle and grind, that's all about you. But when you're powered by God and you trust in his grace, and you can accomplish so much more greater, and the reward for the amount of time that you spend it's amazing. And so I'd rather design my life not based on hustle and grind, but based on my disposition in trusting God. And that's all it is. Is that when we trust God, what we're literally doing, grace is essentially this, is the undeserved favor of God. Those people that worked for 1 hour did not deserve it. But that's the favor, that's the generosity. We're getting a picture of God. God is generous. And the fact that he wants us to succeed. But we have to be willing to trust him. And so when you actually operate from a place of a kingdom perspective, what you're doing, you're trusting the grace of God. It doesn't mean you don't plan, you don't prepare, you don't work. Those people worked. That's the beauty of it all. Is that it's co-creating, meaning there's a partnership that happens, but we have to understand that the work that we do always is delegated to us. And we have delegated authority, and so therefore there is a king. And when we submit it to a king, then the responsibility is on him. You don't have to sign a contract with God because you're his son, you're his daughter. And so hopefully this made a lot of sense for you guys. Love to connect with you guys. If you want to know a little bit more about what we do, just check out the links below. Have a great, beautiful week.